Vasistha continued. In the course of time, by the constant practice of vichara or enquiry and of equanimity, or by being endowed with purity at birth, perfect knowledge arises in the wise man who sees the reality in everything. Spiritual insight happens instantaneously, but it can take a while to become established in it. And here we're given the intriguing possibility that you can be born with this insight and be established in it from birth. I suspect that in the West, such people are possibly labelled as individuals with learning disabilities of some degree. Then his buddhi, or awakened intelligence, regains its nature as pure consciousness, devoid of duality. The infinite consciousness is devoid of body and is unhidden by veils. Its only body is its faculty of awareness and its ability to illumine all things. This is what awareness does. It illumines all things. Without awareness, there'd be no experience. It is through these that consciousness perceives everything that it considers to exist, as a result of the notions that arise in it. This entire universe is an idea that arises in the infinite consciousness. Even so, the self is also able to give rise to different notions within itself and experience the materialization of these notions. I think the word materialization can lead to some spurious ideas. We've got this idea of the yogi materializing things out of thin air. I think a better word would be concretization. We give our notions concrete reality. We imbue our notions of reality with concreteness. We think that's reality out there, and it's solid. Out there is a notion, reality is a notion, solidity is a notion, and yet we think of it as something external to us, independent of us, and something with its own intrinsic substance, separate from us. This is what's meant by the materialization of our notions. Thus, boons and curses are also realized as notions that arise in consciousness, but they are not different from it. These boons and curses obviously relates to the story we've just had of Kundadanta, where the boons were granted by the god and curses were inflicted by the ascetic. How are these two resolved? Clearly, the whole notion of boons and curses is something which is important to the cultural context of the Yoga Vasistha. Spiritually speaking, the curses can be seen as all those things which limit us, and the boons are all those tendencies which direct us to realization of our own nature. And what happens is the curses became enlightened. We see in the curses the opportunity to realize the boons. The curses are also of the nature of consciousness. But if the veil of ignorance has not been removed, and if one still entertains notions of duality or diversity, the boons granted by such a one are ineffective. So the whole idea of boons is tied in with the notion that spiritual understanding somehow gives material advantage. It somehow gives you authority over the forces which shape the physical world. There's actually quite a subtle trap in this. It's a notion which should be avoided altogether. It has no spiritual benefit whatsoever. And yet it's commonly believed, even by some very insightful people, they believe, they might even teach, that something like self-inquiry is good for your physical and mental health. It promotes longevity even. And so you get some teachers promoting therapies based on spiritual understanding. It's not my wish to criticize these things, but I think it's a limited understanding of spirituality. The only way that spiritual understanding gives you authority over the material world is that it removes the authority of the material world from the spiritual practitioner. It frees you from your notions of physicality, of materiality, of an external world. But otherwise, such notions are no longer relevant to spiritual understanding. But we have this in all cultures. We have it with the power of prayer. Is one person's prayer more efficacious than another's? Is a saint's prayer more powerful than a sinner's prayer? Does the saint have more chance of bending the ear of God and thus doing the saint's will? If you're a good person, are your prayers more effective? Have you gained some influence with the cosmic powers that be through your goodness, through your moral authority? So we have this idea, I think, in all cultures. It's also the basis of Tantra. By performing certain rituals or by behaving in certain morally approved ways, you gain access to supernatural power, cities even. But this has got nothing to do with spiritual understanding. Well, it's of no interest to the spiritual practitioner. There's more about this in the next video.